Hey everyone, so this is a review of imaginary numbers. So we're gonna go through, do a few problems, pause the video, do all the problems, and then watch me do them. Okay, so simplifying the square root of negative 48. So just like a normal 48, what perfect square goes into it? 3 and 16. Square root of 16 times the square root of 3 is 4 root 3, but because we have that negative, it's really also a negative, right? Times negative 1, and then the square root of negative 1 is I. So it's 4i root 3. That's it. 47. So remember, you should be memorizing that I to the 0 is 1. I to the first, anything to the first power is itself. I squared is negative 1. I to the third is negative I, and then I to the fourth brings you back to 0, which is 1. So every I to the fourth equals 1. So we take out as many I to the fourths as we can. So we take out, 4 goes into 47 11 times, and there's 3 left over. So that means we take out 11 I to the fourths, and we're left with I to the third. I to the third is negative I. Okay, so now this one is the one that's most commonly done wrong. So I don't know that we did a lot of these in class. So normally I would say multiply those together, but here's the problem. When you multiply those together, you get positive 12. You can't do that with negatives under the root. You need to pull the i's out before you multiply. It's just like with part of the definition of imaginary numbers. So for this one, you need to do, I made this 2i times I root 3, which is 2i squared times root 3. The I squared is negative 1, so negative 2 root 3. If you multiply first and just did 12, you would get 2 root 3. So notice you have different answers, so you have to pull the I out before you multiply. You can't multiply two negatives under a root. It messes with that imaginary number. Okay, so make sure pull the I out before. Now what you could have done is make it I root 4 times I root 3 I squared root 12 if you wanted to go that far. I mean, it would just end up being 4 and 3 anyways. And then simplify, but make sure you don't multiply two negatives under a root. You have to make it an I. All right, solving quadratics. So pause and do these two. So this is the easy one. X squared equals negative 100. And then I can just do the square root of both sides. X equals plus or minus, the square root of 100 is 10. And then we have that negative 1 under there, so I. Number 2, I'm going to do quadratic formula. Change my color. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now you could have divided everything by 5 since it does have a common term. Put that in my calculator and I got negative 475. So let's see. 475. I'm guessing we got our negative 1. I'm guessing 25. Let's see. Yep, 25 and 19. So that becomes square root of negative 1, square root of 25, square root of 19. So that's I. Square root of 25 is 5, root 19. So negative 5 plus or minus 5i root 19 all over 10. And then I can simplify that, divide everything by 5. Negative 1 plus or minus I root 19 all over 2. That's it. All right. Pay attention to the directions, please. So many kids FOIL or multiply out the first two. Make sure it's adding and subtracting. So pause, try them on your own. All right, so I'm just combining like terms. So negative 3 and 7 is 4. And then 7i, negative 8i. That's it. Next one, you can either, if you're good at doing these in your head, do it, or I like to distribute and then just combine like terms. So I get -6 plus 14i. Now remember it is a plus bi, so you're supposed to write it like this. If you wrote 14i minus 6, I'm not really picky about it, but there are teachers that are. All right, so now we have our touching parentheses, so we're going to distribute -6 minus 27i plus 24i plus 108i squared. Those middle two become -3i. 108, this becomes 108. I squared is -1, so that's -108. Combine those like terms, -114 minus 3i. Done. And then the last one, notice these are conjugates. So I'll do the whole thing out, but you can skip steps in this one. 20i minus 20i minus 25i squared. So those middle two terms end up canceling out, and we get 16 minus 25, and then I squared becomes -1. 16 plus 25 is 41. So usually you don't have to write these middle two. If you're good enough at this, you can just skip that step. All right, last slide. Now, these are not supposed to be hard, but these are the ones that students tend to struggle the most on this assessment. So be careful with this. Take your time. You should be able to do this, but it's a lot of like numbers here and there that kids can mess up. So pause and try them. So I have 7 and -4 is -28, and then I have 3i, so I to the third. I to the third is -i, so that's -28 times -i. So my final answer is 28i. I'm going to square, remember order of operations, so this is 4i, and then 3i squared is 9i squared. So that's 36i to the third. Again, I to the third is -i, so we get -36i. Right, this is 36, -i. Right. Next set, I'm going to distribute the 3i. That 14 is just chilling out front. Minus 6i squared plus 12i. That's I squared is -1. So we get 14 plus 6 plus 12i, 20 plus 12i. Again, order of operations, we need to divide. So this, I'm going to rewrite this. This is 7 minus 13i over 2i. So those i's cancel out. So that's just like, I would say 0.5. Or this is a half. However you want to write it. The answer is a half. That's kind of silly. All right, and then down to these. This is when you're dividing, remember that's the same thing as multiplying by the conjugate. So we are going to multiply, what color I want to use, green. The conjugate of 5 minus 2i is 5 plus 2i. 5 plus 2i. FOIL the top, 15i plus 6i squared. And then the bottom, I'm going to skip steps this time, 25 minus 4i squared. That becomes 25 plus 4. So we have a 29 on the bottom. And the top, that becomes -6 plus 15i. And then you can break it into two fractions if you want. On the IXL, they do that. When you have an I in the denominator, for this one, we just multiply the top and bottom by I. So 7i over 3i squared. 7i over 3 times -1. -7i over 3. Right, that's it. All right, so I'm going to have some IXL. There's a worksheet. So we will be having a quiz on Wednesday. And then your project is also due tomorrow. Have a great day.